How did you apply your blackjack skills in marketing? Please give specific examples to teach us to do the same. Well, you've got to think of probabilities. So in blackjack, also the law of large numbers is crucial. So once you determine that, let's say that the probability of staying on a 14 when the dealer's shown a 5 or a 6, because when the dealer is shown a 5 and a 6, that's a bust hand. They're most likely going to bust. So if you've got like even a 13, you stay on a 13. Now, if you've got, and then if you have anything where you can double down, you double down. If you've got anything you split, because that dealer's got a bust hand. So the probability, I don't know what the exact numbers were, I forgot. They're in Beat the Dealer. But say it's 60%, or it might be higher than that. But say that the dealer has a 65% chance of going bust. Okay, well, you may, you do what's correct based on basic strategy, and you may lose that hand. But that it doesn't matter because you made the correct decision. And as far as the law of large numbers, you know that if you continue to do that, then because the probabilities are on your side, you don't have to worry about the fact you just lost the hand. It doesn't matter. You just keep doing that over and over and over and over again, and you just set yourself up to where you can play more hands, because you know that the more you play, the better chances are that you come out ahead. Okay, so how does that apply to marketing, right? So the first thing that did is I was running kind of a consulting deal with advertising and marketing with radio. And we were doing call to action advertising. And for this particular business, no one had really done the numbers, believe it or not, as far as the closing ratios for sales. If you have X amount of leads coming in, then how many of those pan out, right? Like if you've got 100 leads come in, how many sales do you get from those 100 leads? And of those, call it 5 or 10 sales, then what's your average sale? Okay, then what's your cancellation rate? Okay, then you just work through all the numbers, and then so how much did you spend to get those call it 100 leads, right? So then you've got your numbers out there, and if you spend $1 and bring in $2, even if you, let's say, and see the big hang up there, and what Blackjack taught me was back in the day, and you got to remember this is way before online marketing, and now it seems just kind of commonsensical. But before all this online marketing, and before you could get all the data from your website and Google and Facebook and all these things, people really didn't think through things that way, especially in kind of like mom and pop businesses and like small and mid-sized businesses, like 10, 15, 20 employees, stuff like that. So then what would happen in the past is you'd spend like, let's say 10 or 15 grand on marketing. And then that weekend you would, let's say you had a bad sales weekend and you lost money, or you didn't really make enough money to justify the $10,000 you spent on advertising. Well, what most people would do is they'd be like, well, all right, I guess radio doesn't work. We got to move on. I'm glad we tried it, but it's not going to pan out. So what made me different, what Blackjack taught me, is like, wait a minute here, wait a minute. Let me go back to the last 5 years and figure out what the sales closing ratios are. And let me figure out what the average sale is. Let me figure out what if we have a cancellation rate or something like that. And then you reverse engineer the numbers. And then let's say you have that same weekend where you spend the 10 or 15 grand and it doesn't really pan out, but you see that the closing ratios were 5% when they're typically, if you average them out over the whole year, they're at 10%. So then you'd know, okay, well, no, it wasn't the marketing. Just keep putting the pedal to the metal, because the next weekend or the weekend after, the law of large numbers is going to kick in to where instead of having a 5% closing ratio, you're going to have a 15% closing ratio. See? And so then once I knew that I could spend $1 and make $2 in return because of everything I learned in Blackjack, then the only question was, how much money can I spend in marketing? I mean, let's jam, let's rock and roll here. So if I'm spending 10 grand, I'm not going to use profanity, but I would say, F it, let's spend 100. If I'm spending 100 and I'm still making 200, F it, let's spend 500. Why not? You see, I think, and so most people wouldn't have the confidence to ramp up that quickly like I did. And because they wouldn't understand it. It's just a numbers game. It's a numbers game. As long as you're keeping your infrastructure, as long as your infrastructure can handle the excess capacity or the excess lead generation, the additional lead generation, and you maintain your numbers, then it's just a matter of how much money can you spend on the front end. And that's when in this particular business, you know, back in the day when I first got in that business, a good month was like, I don't know, like 150 in sales, like 150 grand in sales, right? And once I learned how to play blackjack, I mean, within 6 months, I mean, I wasn't doing 150 a month. I was doing 150 a week, and even more. I mean, it got to the point where that business we were doing. My memory serves me right. We were doing $1 million a month. When just like a year and a half, 2 years earlier, like 100,000 a month was just awesome, right? And there's no difference. The only thing is I had the confidence to just lay the pedal to the metal and run it at all 8 cylinders and just spend an obscene amount of money on marketing because I understood the ratios. So that's, and I've just, ever since then, I've always done the exact same thing. So when I started investing in real estate, I did the exact same thing. Well, meaning that I looked at the whole project through that lens. When I started another business in 2008 or 9, something like that, exact same thing. I looked at the business through the exact same lens, and there you go. You're off to the races. So that's why I always say, if I'm sure I would have made money somehow, but understanding blackjack, I think I made a lot more money than I otherwise would have, and I definitely made it a lot faster. That's for sure. But you see, you got to have a lot of. It takes a big leap of faith. It does. It's easier, you know, you can sit here and talk about it, and you guys watching can be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. I do the same thing. Maybe, but it really takes a leap of faith to drop $500,000 a month in marketing on a small business, even if you believe it, because some months you lose money. You see, so those months that you lose $50,000, you know, for the whole month or something, or you drop 100,000, you lose $100,000 in 1 month, then all of a sudden you're like, it's like you're playing blackjack and you just lose 5 hands in a row, playing correctly. See, if you're winning all the time, oh yeah, basic strategy, it's easy to fall, it's easy to count cards. But if you have 5 hands in a row you lose, now all of a sudden you're like, shoot, should I really, does this work? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I should ease off. Maybe I should put on the brake a little bit. See, what I would do if I had a month where I lost 100,000, the next month I'd be like, okay, I better spend more. I'm spending more on marketing next month. I'm going to get really crazy, because I would say next month the numbers are going to improve in my favor. I know that. And therefore, it's almost like, again, it's like having it's like having the deck in your favor, and you just lost 5 hands in blackjack, but you know that there's a lot of face cards in the deck, which increases the probability of the player winning. Then you're like, okay, I'm going to bet where I was betting maybe 1 or 2 units per hand. Now I'm going to bet 5 units. I'm going to go balls to the wall because I know that the probabilities are even more in my favor, even though I lost the last 5 hands. And with the marketing, it was just because I knew the law of large numbers would pan out. And if you didn't have that faith, then you wouldn't have, you wouldn't have pressed. And the next month, if you would have put the brakes on, maybe you only would have made 100 and then just broken even for those 2 months. You see, so it's a whole mentality, and that's why I really struggle with people that, on Twitter, when I talk about how the market's in a bubble. I mean, it's obviously in a bubble. Come on. And first thing that's kind of annoying is people just assume that because I'm saying that it's in a bubble, I'm also saying that the market's not going to go up anymore. And I'm not saying that. I don't know how people conflate those two things. So the market can be in a bubble and continue to go up. That's when you state that the market's in a bubble, that's not a prediction. That's not a timing thing. You're just stating a matter of fact, right? But then, the pushback that you always get is, well, it's in a bubble, but if I would have cashed out 2 years ago, then I wouldn't have made all these gains. I would have missed out on this. Number one, as if your only 2 options on the planet Earth are just to be full long the S&P or 100% in cash. Like, those are your only 2 options. Think about that. That's like saying, okay, I want to go out to eat tonight, but boy, there's only one restaurant on the planet Earth. And if I don't feel like eating that food, well, I guess I have to stay home and I can't go out to eat. No, that's insane. No one would ever say that. You can go out to 800 different restaurants, probably within 2 miles of your house, right? So if Mexican food doesn't sound good, if Mexican food is in a bubble, let's say, fine, go get Chinese food. Go get Greek. Get yourself some hummus, whatever. You've got countless options. You don't have to eat Mexican food. It's Mexican food or nothing. It doesn't even make sense. It's bizarre that people just think, well, the only stock market on the planet Earth is the US S&P 500. It's just, I don't get it. The one person on Twitter who said that, I said, okay, well, they say, oh, George, you're always fear mongering and you're costing people all of this money because they would have been invested in the S&P 500. And look at what happened in 2020. I say, well, number one, let's remember that in March of 2020, I was buying stock hand over fist. Now, I wasn't buying the S&P, but I was buying commodity producers. And I made videos on it, for heaven's sakes. And you guys that were on my live streams, you heard me talking about it. I wasn't keeping that a secret by any stretch of the imagination, right? But I responded to this person. I said, okay, well, let's look at your gains in the S&P 500 since 2015, and let's compare that to my gains in international real estate. Let's compare that to my gains in Medellin real estate. And I can promise you, my returns in Medellin real estate has blown away the S&P 500 by a mile. It's not even close. You get my point. So just because I say I think the S&P is in a bubble, number one, it doesn't mean that I'm saying that it's crashing tomorrow. And number two, it doesn't mean that I'm 100% in cash. You can be fully invested while at the same time not being fully invested in the S&P. And for whatever reason, a lot of people just they struggle with that concept for some reason. I mean, I feel sorry for them. Mexican food, at a certain point, it's got to get a little old, doesn't it? You want some variety. I don't know.